right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the FearCast. This is the podcast dedicated to OCD and anxiety spectrum disorders, and getting your life back. I'm your host, Kevin Foss, and I'm a licensed therapist specializing in OCD and anxiety disorders. And thank you all so much for joining me for today's episode. Excuse me, starting out solid already. But thank you all so much for joining me for today. This is a question and answer based podcast. If you are interested, go send me a question over at FearCastPodcast.com or over at Instagram. I am FearCast Podcast over at Instagram. Send me a question by sending me a DM or going to the website. You can also send me an audio question, which is probably the fastest way to get an answer or get an answer to your question. Go and send me a DM over at FearCast Podcast and record your audio over there. You can also email me your audio, like your recorded audio question. Send it to questions@FearCastPodcast.com. It's another good way to get your audio to me. But either way, I will read all the questions and likely put them up, and I've got a little bit of a backlog, and that's what we're pulling from. So I want to try to take the earliest ones and kind of pull them up and eventually get to those, and I eventually will. And I say this, I will continue to do this podcast until there are no more questions to answer, and I imagine there will always be questions to answer because OCD and anxiety is full of questions and never lets you off the hook. But that's what we're trying to learn how to do, is to practice accepting that sometimes we're going to get thoughts, we're going to have doubts and uncertainties in life, and that we can live our life and we can move on with life and be uncertain, worried, feel nervous, feel anxiety, and that's all okay. We can handle anxiety, we can overcome anxiety, we can have that feeling, and we can continue to survive in the course of our life. So I realized that I didn't put up an episode last week. I'm sorry for anybody out there who was looking for the episode going, Monday came, where's the episode? It was a rough week and I just didn't record one. So I apologize to anybody out there, but I will be more consistent and on top of it and getting to these questions. So I'm just letting y'all know, by the way, I signed up for the conference, the IOCDF conference in Chicago. So I'm coming. Are you coming? If you see me there, say hi, wave. I'm not presenting this year, so I'm just going to be walking around and trying to get my CEUs and just trying to learn like everybody else. So I hope you all are going. I hope everybody out there is either attending the online conference, and you know, I also recognize that, you know, the conference is expensive. It's time consuming. There are a ton of local affiliates to the IOCDF. We have one down here, the OCD SoCal, which is a fantastic organization. Check with the IOCDF to see if you have a local affiliate. Also, if you're really interested in going to the IOCDF and there is a financial burden with that, reach out to them. I'm willing to bet they're going to have some sort of scholarship or discount or something like that, just to be able to try to help people as much as possible. But reach out to them and see what can happen. And but either way, there's a ton of information out there, and hence podcasts like this to try to get as much information out there and as much help to people out there as possible. So I've got a fun question today. I think it's a fun question, and it breaks a little bit from what we've typically been talking about. I know I tend to do a lot of, you know, ROCD, and we get sexual orientation obsessions. We get like a lot of sensory motor questions. Haven't gotten as much scroop as I typically would like to see. Those are always fun. Religious or moral are fun questions for me to go over. Fun questions to answer and to think about. But today we got a contamination question, right? I'm taking it as a contamination, more or less, question, and I think that's something that, you know, we've been missing out on for a long time. If you have contamination questions, send them in. If you have harm OCD questions, send them in. Those are always super fun. If you want me to hear about, or if you want me to talk about some super violent stuff, send it in. I want to talk about it. And again, the question, the names that people put up here. So, for example, Katie sent me today's question. Katie's not her name. It might not even be a her. but we're calling her Katie. So if you would like a little bit of anonymity, you can come up with whatever name that you would like, just so that you don't feel outed or worried that the world's going to see you. So that's why I also want to reward the bravery of someone who's going to put up their own audio. And again, call yourself whatever name you would like. Have your friend read it and then send it to me. That's the best way to get it to me. So I have one audio question that I have to put in the back burner, and I'm sorry to the person who sent it in. It's on the back burner. The reason is I want to get Dr. Lorna Meyer back on to talk about FND, functional neurological disorder, and PNES. Oh no, I can't even think of the name. She's going to be so mad. Anyways, PNES, functional neurological disorder. We talked about this. Non-epileptic seizures, psychogenic non-epileptic seizures. There you go. It's a hard thing to say, y'all. But I'm going to have her on at some point again to answer this question, because I'll tell you, if once you hear it, you're going to realize it is way above my pay grade, and I think it's right up her alley. So I'm going to let her jump back in. So why don't we just jump right into this question? Yeah, let's jump right in. So Katie messaged me and said, fungus in fingernails has happened 3 times in the last 5 years. I'm a clean person. I've been to IOP and thought I was way better after all of the exposures until I got it on my toenails. It derailed me. I'm on Lamizil. Let's go for Lamizil. Anyways, some medication. I'm on this medication, but it still looks very disgusting. I had to quit work, and I think all floors, him and I'm presuming this means boyfriend, partner, significant other, brother, someone. All the floors him and I walk on are contaminated, including the couch, because the dogs are going up after laying on the floor. I need to know the goal of treatment, or what the goal of treatment is, now that I'm not habituating to all the fungus. What does ERP look like on a daily basis? Please help. I can barely function at all. So, Katie, thank you so much for sending me this in. I'm so sorry that you're struggling through all of this, and it's the fungus that you're experiencing is so overwhelming, as it is. I'll say this: having fungus under your fingernails and toenails, for that matter, isn't a fully pleasurable experience or a minorly pleasurable experience. I'm sure it's pleasurable to somebody out there, but not to the majority of us, and that's cool. I'm not yucking your yum. That one person out there who's like fungus is your thing. I'm not here to squash that. Make it happen. But for the rest of us, it's not a primarily appreciated thing. So, Katie, I hear you. But I also wonder about, what can we do about this? Because you're talking about how do you do ERP with this? You're talking about you're not habituating to this. So I've got a couple of questions and a couple of things to think about. I also want to go over, why it's important to think about things in these general categories, because that's going to help guide kind of what exposures you might be doing as you are moving forward. As you said, what does ERP look like on a daily basis, presumably to this? So the question is, to what though? That's the first thing. So one of my first questions that I want to know about is what's the anxiety about, right? Is there a feared story? A question I'm always asking myself and my clients to think about is where's the anxiety? What's the anxiety about? Is the feared story? So the feared story, for those of you who may not be familiar with that concept, that idea, the way that I conceptualize OCD, for the most part, and I'll give you my caveat in a minute, is that there is a story that your brain is telling you, about your future, about your character, about your relationships with other people or with God or with the universe, and this story is not one that you want. It's not a story that you want played out. So it's a feared story. That feared story raises questions about what you want, where you're going, who you are, etc. And the outcome of that potential story brings anxiety, discomfort, sadness, uneasiness, etc. The way that you resolve that is through trying to answer that question, or trying to squash that question, or trying to make yourself feel better as a result of that feared story. Right? But your brain is telling you a story, a fairy tale, a potential. right? It starts with what if, right? Or oftentimes start with what if. What if can kind of sound like an accusation and saying like, instead of saying like, what if you're gay, it can sometimes start by saying you're gay. So it kind of cuts out that, but it's raising this question, or it's saying that, giving this accusation about you and what you're about. So that's what I want to kind of know about. Like, what is the feared story for you in this, Katie? You say, you said is the fear story like, well, I'm not a clean person. You said it emphatically. I'm a clean person. So what is it now? Are you now not a clean person? Are you sick now? Right? Maybe it means like you're healthy, but now something has happened that suggests you might be sick, and that might be worrisome, right? Maybe it's you got this thing, you have this fungus in your nails, and now you're going to spread it to other people, and that spreading to other people, I mean, that's what bad people do. That's what unclean people do. That's what, fill in the blank, right? So all these different narratives, these different stories are going to lend itself to different types of exposures and different types of things that we're going to do. Right? Like if it's just simply, an identity, I'm now no longer a clean person, exposures are going to be different, where the mindset is going to be, yes, we're trying to bring on this dirtiness, but then we're going to be tolerating these stories about your character and now no longer being who you are. And by the way, it can extend even further. If it's now you no longer are this clean person, well, then who are you? For some people, it can ultimately be this worry of this like snowball, let's go with that, slippery slope into, I don't even know who I am anymore, right? And it kind of turns into this existential question, right? So are you sick now? That might lend itself to more exposures related to health or wellness, et cetera. And the idea of maybe now being sick or struggling or feeling pain, the idea of spreading it to other people. We're talking more of a moral component to it. So you can see where we're really honing in on what the anxiety story, the feared story is about, shows us what types of exposures we want to try to be honing in on and what sort of things are going to be important to you in the process. So that's one aspect. Just what if so if there's a feared story, but what if there's not a feared story? What if it's just this feels gross? Right? It's gross to have fungus on your nails. It might be. So for some people, we would call this kind of gross OCD or something to that effect. There are a bajillion different names. But anyways, there's an obsession about this feeling that you get where there isn't really a feared story. It's just kind of this general yucky, grossy sort of feeling that you can't shake, you can't get rid of, you can't undo, other than going through all this rigmarole to try to eliminate it, right? Now, again, the difference between those two is going to help guide what types of exposures you do, and even differentiate between what type of approach we're going to generally use. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And for those who are active listeners to this podcast, you probably are aware of where I'm going with this. But Katie, I want you to start to think about what the differences between those two are. Now, you mentioned that you felt better until you got it on your toenails, right? And I wonder what that meant. Right? If you were in my office, I'd be asking these questions, but you're not, so I'm asking the universe or whatever it might be. All right, so Katie, if you're listening to this, what did it mean that you felt better? All right, meaning you didn't feel as triggered to your anxiety, right? So you went through all this treatment, you went through IOP, you did all the exercises, all the exposures, and you felt better. Was it just simply that you didn't feel as anxious? I wonder if was there something different about the fungus itself, right? In the process of, not spending as much time ruminating about your fungus on your hands, or starting to take the medication, or maybe cutting back on some compulsions that you may or may not have been doing around the fungus might have helped deal with the fungus. And this is obviously all speculation, right? But is it that you kind of it kind of went away and it felt better and it was easier to feel better about it because it wasn't there, right? Now, the goal, part of the expressed goal of exposure and response prevention is symptom reduction, is anxiety reduction, right? So mission accomplished, right? But is it now that there's this new, quote, new story that showed up, right? Now you have it on your toes. Well, now it feels like, Well, I'm sorry. Well, let me back up. Now it feels like there's this brand new story, right? But what does it mean to you that it's on your toes, right? Is it that this one's different, right? Maybe it's I'm worse or I'm dirtier because it's now on my toes, right? Maybe it's I can't handle it. I can't handle it because maybe I could handle it on my hands. I did a lot of work to handle it on my hands, but now that it's on my feet, now it's bad. And I don't know what that story is. But one thing I want you to first start to do is to challenge those narratives, to look at the ways that your brain is trying to twist those stories and suggest that it's ultimately different or special or worse or weirder or you're more broken now or whatever it is. And to look at maybe some cognitive distortions. There's a bajillion lists online you can find, right? Some of the most popular ones are going to be black and white thinking, right? I was okay, but now I'm not. Right, it kind of flips over into this like let's all or nothing thinking. Right, there's catastrophic thinking. Right, now it's the end of the world. Right, there can be this labeling that may be going on. Right, I'm now dirty. I'm now bad. I'm not clean. Right, so challenging those narratives and trying to think differently about yourself, about the situation, and to think a little bit more broadly about what may be true or what may be going on. Let's see if I can find my notes here. All right. Here's what I also want you to do, though. What sometimes happens with the, quote, new story that shows up is anxiety suggests that because it's now a new situation, a new story, all the skills, all the things that you worked on, everything that you did in your IOP or various other treatments to try to work on your OCD now don't count because they're on your feetsies, right? That's a complete lie. I'm not going to say complete lie. It's a vast majority lie because it's similar. It's a very, very, very similar situation, unless the narrative is entirely different. And that's what you need to try to consider is what's the story about your toes? You get the idea. All right, but the vast majority of tools that we use for one type of OCD, we're going to apply to another subtype. It's a lot of the tools are still going to apply to almost every other type of anxiety in general, generalized anxiety, specific phobias, right? A lot of these different ways, generalized anxiety, all these different ways that anxiety can show up. Did I say generalized anxiety twice? Doesn't matter. Point is, we're going to do these. We're going to apply a lot of the same tools to it. So if your brain is saying you don't know what to do, I want you to reflect back on the things that you can do, the things that worked, and try to apply those in this situation too. And I'm willing to bet it's going to make some difference. It's going to help. Okay, before I even get into the other treatment components, I want to acknowledge some practical advice for the fungus. All right, so I don't think there's anything wrong with having reasonable responses to health conditions that are commonly and demonstrably present in your life. Now, what that means is if you went to a doctor and they said you have X health issue, so you need to treat it in X, Y, or Z ways. Great. So we're going to follow the doctor's guidance on that and not do it to excess, not do it. Try not to do it perfectly. We're not going to avoid it. We're not going to resist doing it. We're not going to try to supplement in with something that we read weirdly on the internet. We're going to follow what the doctor's orders were on this and see where it goes, and then get follow-up information from the doctor and see if the things that we're doing are helping or not. Right? So when it comes to the fungus, I keep grabbing my nose. It's so itchy. I don't know what's happening. I think my nose is dissolving off my face, and I don't know what's happening to me. It's probably fungus on my nose. That's probably it. All right, it's my mustache. It's itchy. Oh no, something. I've got lice on my snoot. That's probably what it is. Anyways, all right. So, what has your doctor said about this? You said you're on medication. What did the doctor say about it? Right? Did they say, there's a washing or cleaning regimen to this. There's going to be, change your sheets once a week, right? It's going to be sterilized in specific places, shower in specific ways. I don't know what it is, But you want to be thinking of, in addition to dealing with this from an OCD and anxiety perspective, we also want to deal with genuine health issues from a health perspective. Now, working with a therapist in person to synthesize these two and to talk about the overlap between those two, the temptation to do way too much, the temptation to do not enough, all of this is going to be important to try to figure out how to bring these two worlds together. Because ultimately, they're going to be helpful, especially in this case that you're talking about having a diagnosed medical issue, the fungus, and having an obsession and anxiety about them. Okay? So that's what I want you to consider. We can also think about, from a practical perspective, is there anything that you're doing that is making the fungus situation worse? I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with having an honest appraisal over what your actions are doing, and are those actions negatively impacting or bringing on that fungus, right? So, like, one, are you sure it's your dog that's bringing this on, right? Have you taken the dog to a vet and made sure the dog does or doesn't have this fungus? If the dog, doesn't, stop blaming the dog, man. It's rude to the dog. But I mean, is it that you're going to your local Y and working out, and then you're going and taking showers without sandals, and it's a known, fungal hotspot of, that's like, I don't know, you're showering right after patient zero in your neighborhood. I don't know what's happening out there, but if that's what's happening, we also want to consider how the things that we're doing in life are negatively impacting it. Now, of course, all of this can lead to a lot of compulsive ruminative thinking and checking again and all this stuff. So it can be helpful, again, to have a therapist that you're talking to about this to work out some of those details. Now, this can, if you don't have this can be a kind of one and done reassurance process, meaning thinking through, are there some things that I'm doing that's bringing this on? Has the doctor said anything about this that I need to take into account? And once you go through this thought process, put it into action, and then resist continually analyzing it over and over and over again. Going to be unhelpful. All right. So let's shift past this and let's talk about some treatment methods you can use. So there are kind of two that are coming to mind. So you wanted to know about ERP. Now, remember, the goal of ERP is to reduce anxiety and have a greater ability to resist compulsions, right? I think a reasonable outcome to all this, OCD, ERP treatment stuff is to be able to notice that you're going to have anxiety, allow yourself to feel that anxiety, and resist doing compulsive behaviors. Right. So as a general rule, less compulsions, more of life, right? Doing less of the stuff that's pulling you away from life by ruminating, avoiding repetitious behaviors, reassurance seeking, all this stuff. That stuff pulls you away from your life. And instead, going to live your life more. Getting out there, spending time with family and friends, going back to work, going on vacation, doing what you want to do. Knowing that sometimes in the process, you might get a fungal infection. You also may be someone who is more prone to fungal infection. And if that is the case, we need to open this up to just part of your life. And that's going to be related to that feared narrative and that feared story that you have about yourself and the world around you, right? I am more prone to bronchial infections, meaning I'm more likely to get pneumonia, bronchitis, lung infection, and one sort of like something like that, right? I'm more likely to get that than the average person. So when I get that, it's not really a surprise to me, which is maybe why I sound so snorky or congested. I'm kind of coming off of something. But it's just part of life. And we have to incorporate that into who we are and how we interact with the world around us. Okay, so that's getting back to it, that's the expressed goal of exposure and response prevention. The expressed goal of this other method of kind of more of a gross-focused treatment of the mastery model. The goal of that is ultimately to have a greater ability to go and live your life. Right. So the mastery model, and I've had some episodes on this in the past, so you can go back and look at those or read those. And you know what? Why don't I just be a smart and thoughtful person and just Google it right now? Okay, I have one episode, number 191, called Wet Paint Contamination Obsessions from Years Ago. I talk about the mastery model there. And Episode number 142, Disgust-Based OCD and Evolving Treatment Methods with Rich Gallagher. Check it out. So both of those episodes will be really helpful. I know I have another episode or a bunch of other episodes on it, but check out the stuff from Rich Gallagher. So the kind of basic idea behind this is that we want to be going and living our life as best we can, knowing that sometimes we're going to get this disgust sort of feel, this gross feeling that sometimes happens in life, right? There's a lot of gross stuff in part of life, right? So, some of the basic examples that I know he gives are things like, an EMT who's, it's just disgusting. They're just disgusted by the feeling of blood, right? Or the fact that there's blood around. Well, blood is a big part about being an EMT or a doctor for that matter, right? So the question is, instead of just quitting your job and never pursuing your goal or your dreams of being an EMT or doctor, whatever it might be, we're going to say, what do we need to do to get you to your job, right? Does it mean double gloving, triple gloving for that matter, washing a bunch? Think about what you need to do and then saying instead of just saying we're going to start small and go up, we're going to start by doing all the compulsions we need to do to get you to work. And through the process of doing work, our brain will slowly get used to it, and we get accustomed to it, and we develop a mastery over that feeling. That's kind of that idea. And then as we start to do that, then we start to peel off one layer of glove, and then we continue to work, and get used to it by staying at that place. Right, so it's kind of it's a backwards version of doing exposure and response prevention, but you're still getting there. It's like you're starting with, if you're at a fear of heights, instead of starting with, going up to the first floor and then dealing with that, you're going to the 50th floor on day one and doing the compulsions you need to do to stay at the 50th floor, and then eventually, as you continue to stay on the 50th floor, you then start pulling it down. Anyways, that's too much yammering. All right. So those two models are different, but they're also getting at the same sort of thing. But it all depends. I think it depends on that story that you're giving yourself. Now, I'm throwing these out there because I don't know which one you are doing, which one would be helpful for you, but also for people who are looking at themselves and wondering what would be more helpful for them. Okay, so ERP really only works then if we're exposing you to the feared stimulus and giving you an opportunity to disconfirm that feared kind of connection, right? That the fungus means X. The fungus will result in Y, right? So we want to be doing exposures to that connection, whatever it might be, so that we can disconfirm it, can break it down, so you can realize that the fungus and that story are actually disconnected, right? They're only connected within your imagination, right? So if it's simply just you are uncomfortable by the presence of the fungus, you got the fungus, man. So it's there. So because it's there, what we're going to start by practicing is response prevention, right? Pulling back on compulsive behaviors that are unhelpful, or in worst case scenarios, they're making it worse, right? So it might be excessive washing, it might be unnecessary cleaning or sanitizing. Now, or reassurance seeking, or going online and reading about this fungus, or, I think you get the idea. Slowly pulling back on those and dealing with the anxiety that just exists within the presence of that, of the feeling of having the fungus, right? So now I say pulling back on the cleaning stuff other than what the doctor said. Right? And that's where it can be helpful to be talking with a doctor and or a therapist about what that balance is going to be for you. How much, you're following the doctor's orders, but how much of that is stepping on or is infringing on, or is the compulsion that you're doing infringing on that? I don't know, I'm being confusing perhaps, but you get the idea. We're trying to do the healthy things because there is a diagnosed, observable medical thing going on, not a hypothetical thing. And that is a subject of a whole different podcast. You actually have the fungus. That's different from I might get fungus, or I may have fungus. Okay. All right. So But if there's a separate feared story, again, we're going to write scripts. We're going to write the word down and we're going to put it up on Post-its. We're going to repeat those words or those ideas as you're looking at your nails or cleaning your nails or polishing your nails. We're going to walk around in public, with that, if it's like that guilt of like, I might spread it to people, or I might, I'm just, contaminated and I'm walking around in public, and you're going to walk around whispering to yourself, fungus is among us, or something to that effect, right? There's going to be a lot of stuff that we're going to do intentionally to focus on that feared narrative, right? That story, and then practicing getting used to the feeling that you're having and resisting those compulsive behaviors. In the process, again, from an ERP perspective and from a habituation perspective, I know a lot of people don't really talk about the habituation, is that you're going to likely feel less of the overt anxiety, right? Good. Your body and brain are going to get used to it. Your brain is going to learn this isn't dangerous. I don't need to be sending all these danger messages or all this, overwhelm or fight or flight into the system with this thought, in this place, in this action, etc. Now, if it is the mastery model perspective, right? So there's no story, you're just kind of grossed out, then the exposure for you is to live your life, resist avoidance, and to practice response prevention, along with what your doctor is saying about dealing with fungus that is actually there, right? So you're going to think about, what are you putting off? What are you avoiding? What are you not doing because of the presence of this fungus? You said you're not going to work. Maybe you need to start going back to work. What would it take for you to get yourself back to work? Wearing shoes and socks, then coming home immediately washing your shoes and socks? Great. Do it. Go for it. Is it you're going to go back to work, but you're going to wear gloves every day? Okay, then that's what you're going to do. But you're going to get back to work, or you're going to go spend time with your friends, or you're going to give your kids a bath, or you're going to go back to church, right? Fill in the blank with the thing that you're doing, that you're going to start doing again, and what you would need to do it. And you show up. And through the process of continually going there, you're going to kind of get used to it. It's going to feel easier. And then you pull back on some of those unnecessary compulsive behaviors. If your doctor is saying, your fungus is so freaking bad, you need to wear gloves all the time in public, otherwise it is going to spread to the public because it's the worst fungus we've ever seen, then wear gloves. Gloves are now part of your life. But gloves are part of your life. So go out and live your life and wear gloves. Is it the end of the world? I don't think so. But for right now, what you're talking about is this feared narrative, and this worry is preventing you from living a life that you want to be living, right? So that's the idea of what we're trying to get at. So, all right, Katie, that's what I got for you today. I hope this has been helpful. I know it's a lot of information, a lot of stuff. Go check out some of those past podcasts if you want to learn more about the mastery model. I think in this case, it might be really, really helpful. But again, I don't know the details of the story. So thank you so much for sending that in. Everybody out there, if you have questions about this, if you want to add more detail about this, if I missed something that you think would be really important for Katie to know, send it to me. Send it to me over at FearCastPodcast.com. Go send it to me over at Instagram. I want to hear it, and I will add it to a future podcast if I in fact missed something. So thank you all so much for joining me. If you are joining me on YouTube, hey there. If you're joining me on just the regular podcast, hi. Right. Thank you so much, everybody. And go out and take a risk. Or wait, what do I even say? Oh my gosh, it's been such a day. All right. Take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye. Thank you for listening to the FearCast. If you would like your question answered on a future episode, please click on the Submit a Question link at FearCastPodcast.com. If you would like your question answered sooner, please send me a recording of your question to questions@FearCastPodcast.com, or by sending me an audio message through Instagram by DMing me at FearCastPodcast on Instagram. If you like the FearCast, please write a review on your podcast platform of choice. Please remember that the FearCast is not a substitute for psychotherapy. If you need a little bit of help in your recovery, please go over to FearCastPodcast.com and click on the Find Help link, and there's going to be some information for you there. So until next time, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye.